Thank you very much, Joe, for the introduction. Thank you to all of you for taking the time to join us this morning, and thank you for the organizers for the kind invite. We are here this morning in this session to speak a little bit about the amazing solar situation in South Africa, but mostly also to share a little bit of intel about what is happening in the rest of the continent. There are similarly interesting things happening across the continent, albeit quite different. And I'm very, very happy to have 4 experts joining us today to share a little bit about their experience in the rest of the continent, so they can tell you a little bit more about what are the interesting things to look out for if you want to venture outside of South Africa. First, before we start the conversation, I'd like to give a little bit of background. At AFSIA, the Africa Solar Industry Association, we are keen to collect quite a lot of information about solar across the entire continent, just to have a bit of better picture, data, workable information, it's not always exactly precise. It's very difficult to collect information, but we're doing our best, and we try to be as comprehensive as possible. Next slide. No. All right, so based on the information that we were able to collect for last year across Africa, a little bit less than 4 gigawatt peak were installed last year, 3.7 based on our data, out of which almost 3 exclusively in South Africa. So that's an amazing 80% of all the capacity added last year in South Africa. So only, if you want to look at it this way, only 20% in the 54 remaining countries. That may sound like little, but it was actually an excellent year for everybody, of course, South Africa, but for the rest of the continent as well. And we're back on a nicely increasing trend across the continent. South Africa is the absolute champion, there's no doubt about this, even before 2022. To give you some idea, out of all the 16.3 gigawatt that we were able to identify so far, currently in operation, 48% is installed in South Africa. 79% was installed, of the installed capacity this year was installed in South Africa. And it's mostly driven by CNI, new CNI capacity, which is a really interesting new trend. In the years before, it was mostly driven by large-scale projects, government tenders driven projects, and there is a total shift happening now, which I'm personally hoping South Africa is showing the way to the rest of the continent, because this is really something where we see a lot of impact. And to give you a little bit more information about the past, this share went up to 84% in 2014, and South Africa has always at least contributed to 30% of all new capacity added every single year since we started collecting data in 2010. Now, this is one way of looking at things, but there's also other angles. If you look at for example, the capacity per capita is, of course, a big country with a large population. It's normal that they have a lot of solar installed. But actually, if you look at it this way, in this case, South Africa is only 3rd. You have Seychelles, Namibia, Mauritius, Cape Verde, small countries. But if they install a little bit of solar, suddenly they are performing better. And then also another way of looking at it is the percentage of solar in the overall energy mix. In this case, South Africa is not even in the top 10. So there's different ways of looking at things, and this is what we will be discussing today. Also, and this is the last thing I want to mention, of course, you are here all used to CNI solar, large-scale solar, residential solar, and this is the reality in South Africa. But across the continent, solar is a lot more varied, a lot more diversified. We've got pico solar, we've got solar home systems, we've got PUE, productive use of electricity. You see here an example of a solar irrigation system. We've got mini-grids, and we've got other a bit more exotic applications. In this case, I took the example of solar street lighting. It's really, really diversified across the continent, and I thank in advance my panelists for sharing a little bit about the things they are doing across the continent. Winnie, maybe we'll start with you, if that's okay. You're standing the furthest away. If you could please tell us a little bit more about you, about the company you're working with, and also your footprint across the continent, so that everybody can understand where you've been practicing your skills.
Thank you so much, John. Good morning, everyone. I'm Winnie. I'm from UL Solutions, and my role there is a project manage renewable energy projects, particularly wind, solar. For solar, there is PV, and then rooftop, as well as concentrated solar projects. So in here, I'm responsible for managing the technical as well as the E&S aspect of such projects, from pre-financing as well as monitoring and reporting during the construction and operation of these projects. So I'm also involved in managing and monitoring transmission and distribution and substation projects. In addition, I work with different parties, so we have different needs. So we've got lenders who are looking at us supporting them in managing financial risk, as well as preventing reputational risk. And then also we've got contractors who are responsible for actually implementing this project, like building a solar plant, and their role there is just to conduct that. But also we find that in that instance, they only focus on that aspect, and then in the process they almost neglect or not exactly look at other non-technical risks, which in an African context are pretty paramount. And as such, because if we don't look at that, we're also looking at compromising the project success. Then I'm also looking at engaging with the project sponsor. This team wants to look at engaging with all these different parties in building the solar plant and operating it, because of all the solar that we have in South Africa, throughout the world, in Africa, I mean. And then I also engage with the project communities. So for these people, these projects are usually, like I mentioned earlier, I'm involved in more PV, and except for rooftop, these projects are located in remote areas. As such, these communities are absolutely looking out for development, and they're excited about that, and jobs and infrastructure development. But in the process, they may also not be informed of risks, like negative impacts that are also associated with the development. And also in certain instances, they're unaware of these risks may not necessarily be communicated. And also in other aspects, what we find is we've got these unreasonable expectations where the whole community thinks a particular project is going to solve all the problems in a community, which is unrealistic. So that's what, in a nutshell, what I deal with. And in terms of footprint, I'm involved in, outside of South Africa, there is Botswana, there is Zambia, there is Kenya, and Rwanda, and Malawi, and Mozambique. So that's in a nutshell of myself. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We'll move on like this. Michael, can you please give a quick introduction about the work you do and where you're active across the continent?
Sure. Thank you, John. Great to be here. Thank you for everyone coming down. From my side, joined Seedron Solar about 4 years ago, specifically geared towards SADC, or your African markets. It's now become your sub-Saharan African markets for us. Supplying as far as Sierra Leone in Africa and as far as St. Helena in the middle of the Atlantic. But from our side, typically, we always looking at new products specific per each market. We're supplying around 15 countries outside of South Africa every month. And each country has their own specific customs, from duties and VAT down to payments, and how do we get payment from our customers. And that's something that we look on from a daily basis. It's every day is new. There's always a new challenge as policy changes or solutions or better solutions become available to us. But pretty much from Seagen's side, or Seagen Solar's side, is that we're an online-based portal where we empower our customers with design tools. So we take a lot of the heavy lifting work out of designing systems. We obviously avail all of our TUV certificates, installation manuals, and part of that is also regular and free training that we have almost weekly. As an example, we've got quite a big off-grid inverter order in Nigeria, where we've done training with that specific customer, but we're doing refresher training because we understand we're very far away from these key markets. And that's something that we are driving as Seagen ourselves. We are trying to be one of the largest players in Africa, and there are a few exciting initiatives coming through, and that's it's still just waiting for sign-off, so I can't give too many details. But basically, that's in a nutshell. We constantly trying to change to the ever-changing market. I like what you said with the PUE there earlier, John. That's something that our product team are looking at, trying to tailor each offering per country. As we know, different countries require different things, and that's all down to their grids and policies. So that's in a nutshell from me, John, from what Seagen's side and what we do on a daily basis. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Over to you, Frans Willem. Can you tell us a little bit, for those in the room who might not know you yet, can you tell us a little bit what you do and how you approach the rest of the continent?
Thanks, John. Good morning. Morning, everybody. Frans Willem from Markia. So I'm from Lumax Energy, a South African company. We started in around 2015 when the solar market in South Africa was just gaining some traction. And Lumax decided to focus on assisting the solar market to find structural solutions across the board to fix your panels, to be it roofs, to the ground, or carports, or custom solutions like that. So over the last 9 years, the company has expanded quite a lot together with the market. We've worked with some of the earlier pioneers and EPCs that assist this country in getting traction in the solar market. It's been a very interesting ride. It's been a continual upwards trend. Solar has just gotten more and more traction. It's probably been the most interesting in the last 2 years when the government relaxed a lot of its regulations on size, and there's been an influx of so many international players into South Africa. It's fascinating to see what's happening and how the market is moving this year, and we're very excited to be part of it.
Thank you very much. And finally, Ian, can you tell us a little bit more about Namene, please?
Awesome. Thanks, John. Good morning, everybody. Yeah, I think Namene, we come from a slightly different angle, and John mentioned the Pico side of products. So we've geared ourselves to produce and distribute clean technology to the 600-odd million people that live off-grid and that don't yet have access to electricity. And we do this through designing and manufacturing our own Pico product. And then to make it even more affordable to the kind of extreme poor and hardest to reach populations, we've used climate finance and carbon offsetting to reduce the price of those Pico products to the end users. And so currently we do around 40 to 50,000 products per month through our accredited projects, specifically in Zambia, Zimbabwe, and Namibia, and Lesotho. And of those countries, we've distributed close to 1.7 million lights to around 800,000 families, kind of offsetting about 1.4 million tons of CO2 people not using open flame candles and kerosene lanterns. And into the future, we're looking at further project certifications into East Africa, so DRC, Ethiopia, Burundi, Tanzania, through the same model. So using carbon credits to subsidize the Pico solar lights, and we sell them about 1/3 of the retail value. So really empowering communities to buy product cash and start saving. So the combined saving from avoidance of buying batteries, other fuel sources, we've generated around a saving of about 25 million USD for the populations that have received our lights. Outside of that, we also do commercial distribution of these lights. We work with corporates around CSI, ESG, give back, considering the impact of these lights on populations. So we've done some work with APSA in South Africa, and also big NGOs around disaster relief, because the lights can be deployed quite rapidly. Yeah, and I think that's us in a nutshell.
Thank you very much. So we see we have quite a diversified panel of specialists really touching on all the full diversity of solar across Africa. And the idea is really to candidly share a little bit about your experience and highlight some of the differences or commonalities that we experience here in South Africa compared to the rest. Winnie, maybe I'd like to start with you and delve more into the large-scale projects, the large grid-connected projects. There is a strong history of such projects here in South Africa, very successful in the early stage, a little less successful later on. How would you compare, based on what you've seen, based on the projects and the clients that you've advised, how would you compare the situation here in South Africa with the rest of Africa? Is it very comparable? Are there fundamental differences? How well is the rest of Africa doing, and what are opportunities for people here in the audience?
Thanks, John. So I think there are quite some differences. I'll just step back and say, because with REAP and all the large-scale projects, they have been on for a pretty long time, since round one, and we've had pretty much a lot of lessons learned from all those projects up until now. Now, in the other African countries, what we notice then is, particularly at the tender phase, there is just the expectations, the RFI is not very clear, as well as the assessment. So if you're already starting from that point where it's not very clear what we are looking for, it then becomes difficult to compare, for example, apples and apples, because of the contractors or the project sponsors are not sure what is expected of them and what makes them different. So that's quite big. And also I find that what then happens is that the bigger thing perhaps is in terms of policy, where it's not very clear where countries are different. All African countries are different, despite all this resource that we have. They're different, but there isn't perhaps a goal, or we all talk about the Paris Agreement, but it's not very clear how it is at ground level or how it's cascaded. So it's not very clear even to investors, because it's like, yeah, we're planning to do this, but it's not clear how it will be from that policy down to the tender process and how the process will happen. And also we find that because of political instability, that is concerning, because we find, I mean, now we've had coups and all these issues. It's just not, it then affects the need or the financiers or the investors in terms of looking at these kinds of projects. And also, there is a lot of potential though, but it's just perhaps to look at and be aware of these other aspects that that could potentially hamper at least the speed at which all these projects are happening. And like the previous speaker mentioned about grid, it is pretty, it is not as developed, even if the one here in South Africa has got constraints. In African countries, it is, in some African countries, it is not as developed. And so that already is going to affect, and with all the losses that are associated with that grid, there's a lot of investment that's required. So there's potential, but there's a lot of potential, but there are also things that we need to be on the lookout for to say, okay, because we know this risk, how are we going to manage it going forward?
Yeah, talking about the grid capacity, the load shedding that we experience here, in many other countries, it's also load shedding, but just because there is no grid. Maybe Ian, you can tell us a little bit about this. You mentioned earlier today, like an estimated 600 million people living off grids in Africa. That's almost half of the population. Your company is one of the companies providing some solutions for this. Can you maybe explain a little bit more in details how these systems work and what can be done with those systems and what are the limits, just to give an idea of what is possible?
Sure. So I think it's finding this balance between affordability and getting people onto the energy ladder. And to your point, I think most countries outside of South Africa, the grid's just not there, right? So it's a lot of distributed grids, distributed energy supply is happening in these different pockets, but finding that balance of affordability. So there's an explosion of solar home systems, which allows for 2 or 3 LED lights, cell phone charging, and what's kind of classified as tier 1 energy access. And I think the struggle there is to provide energy as a service so that people can start moving along. And the challenge, again, is around the affordability and keeping people on that grid in these most remote areas where we're kind of balancing between environment and people and getting off fossil fuel burning versus the profitability of generating electricity. So a lot of these systems are great, but I think we struggle with funding mechanisms to roll them out quickly. And then the distributed networks that are being created is how they feed back into a national grid, and do they feed back into a national grid? What are the spaces around income generation for companies that are investing these kinds of projects? So in our case, we've used private equity to fund the development of our carbon projects, and the return comes on the future sale of VER. So that's a mechanism we've used to get Pico solar lights out, to get people onto that first rung. So it's looking at the blend of different finance options on a return on your investment in places where copper cable is not going to be laid, right? And then using technology to look at that. So there's a couple of companies that are doing some trials around solar home systems as a service. So it's an investment to put solar home systems in a village, and then there's a combined local payment of the systems to offset the capex, and then to buy electricity from just a little single freestanding solar home system per village or per household. So the challenges are around how do we get people off carbon, and then the investments around creating the product, creating the value, and keeping people on that kind of clean energy ladder. And I think there's technology available, right, where we don't need to have a cable, that we can still monitor those devices, monitor electricity, and so doing start moving people up the rung as we develop bigger and bigger capacity.
Thank you very much. Frans Willem, you've been working on the other side of projects, the large-scale projects, the big CNI projects. You're in a special position here in this panel where you are manufacturing locally. I'd love to hear your point of view on how important this is for your clients and projects in South Africa versus other clients and other projects outside of South Africa. Does it play a big role? Is it a strong sales element for you outside of South Africa? Or is it actually a complicating factor and you need to fight even more for achieving projects and sales?
Yes, I don't think there's a simple answer. to the manufacturing problem. What I can comment on is that South Africa traditionally has had some strong manufacturing industries, and some of them have declined somewhat, and hopefully we can leverage what's happening in renewable energy to revitalize some of the manufacturing industry in South Africa. I looked at some stats from Stats SA, and it looks like since 2005, South Africa has dropped about 309,000 jobs in the manufacturing industry, where 50,000 or so was in the steel and automation industry. And now this is a good opportunity to do a lot of hardware work, a lot of automation work, and get some of that back. You do need various things to function correctly. So, for example, South Africa has a steel master plan, and this is an attempt between government, labor, and industry to sit around the table and negotiate how South Africa can do something it's traditionally been good at and keep on keeping that industry alive. So it's been fairly successful in the automotive space, and I think our government was quite active in assisting and getting international investors to localize and to work with local fabrication partners. So you've got a lot of big companies like Volkswagen and Mercedes and BMW and Ford with plants locally, and they have a significant downstream effect on manufacturers all over South Africa and keeping the likes of ArcelorMittal alive. But there's challenges. So if you look at raw material rates, the East is significantly cheaper than most other countries. So when you're starting off and your raw material rates are 15, 20, 25% higher than other countries, you need a lot of support to make this work. You need the right duty protections, you need the right local content specifications, and on some of the large-scale jobs, I think South Africa in the solar PV space has done that on the IPP space, and they've enabled that. Africa has similar ideas, but obviously executing this in a functioning economy is complicated and hard, and you need a lot of people to make decisions together. So I think we keep on fighting that fight, and we keep on working on that, and the renewable energy is moving so fast that sometimes nobody in government keeps up. In terms of the C&I space, doing local fabrication and working with local production partners is very beneficial, because there's a matter of speed of availability. There's a matter of being able to look at the quality of the locally manufactured product and being able to see it in factory, and that's quite beneficial. I think that answers the question.
Very good. Thank you very much. Continuing maybe on the CNI space, because this is one of the specialty of Cegen. Michael, your company works with many installers in South Africa and across the continent. To echo or to bounce on what Franz Willem just mentioned, like, do you see some major differences between requests from clients here in South Africa versus the rest of Africa, or is everybody in the end looking for the same kind of things? Are the needs the same? Are the solutions the same?
Interesting question there, John. A lot of it from our side, a lot of our neighboring countries tend to follow South Africa quite stringently, like in Namibia, Botswana, Zimbabwe. Obviously, we supply them, we're on their border. So we do have very common products. I think where it comes down to it is when we're selling these products, we've got to be very wary and aware of where these products are being used from a warranty perspective. And with that, we've seen quite a surge in high voltage systems coming across in South Africa, and that's also starting to mirror from the Africa space. We're seeing a lot of HV systems going into your hospitality side of it, your medical side of it, outside of South Africa, even a university in Namibia. So yes, we are seeing that surge from there, but a lot of, and it relates to a few more questions, it's again down to policy. I think where we could see greater growth in all systems across. I mean, you've supplied that FCA report, and if you go through and see how many countries actually have VAT stapled to their products, there's a huge hamper, obviously, against renewable energy providers. So that's something that we see it from our customers. When we invoice as a line item, but customers want it bulked and as a full PV system. And that's something from a policy side of it, yes, a solar battery and a solar inverter, and that's something our customers have to really push hard on. So I find the policy very rigid and very tight. It's a new technology, and I think policymakers will jump more. The reserve banks and the guys that make these decisions see it as a quick money-making scheme for them to prop that up. So policy and VAT is a big thing I find into these markets, but yes, as each market matures, it is starting to track your more mature markets like South Africa. We've seen that upsurge, especially on your big hybrid units. Your container PCS units are starting to come across, where that's starting to become quite popular in South Africa. But again, going to that level, it's all about the support side. We can all sell products, but we're dealing with high voltage energy, and it's dangerous. So it's something that it's an informative and educational process while selling these products. So it's a bit of you're always trying to catch up from our side, from a training perspective. When we see a high voltage system going into Tanzania or into Angola, that we have to make sure that customer's trained up. We pull that back into our team, and we do that training for those specific systems. So it's just something that if we could be a bit more lenient on the customs VAT space, they would promote it, and then obviously drive further systems, which is quite great. Looking at Nigeria, which one of my guys are coming to join you in Powerlec, the dropping of the subsidy, that's huge. That opens up a huge space from a commercial, from your residential pico, all the way up to your utility scale almost. So that's something that's being aware of. But then again, what does that look like from a PV system side, and how do we find a cost-effective solution with regards to those specific barriers like VAT? So that's pretty much things we see that are hampering the further development of renewables. But then again, it's, as solar becomes more prevalent, people learn about it, we hope to see more positive policies to drive that. An example, you look at Tanzania, 0 VAT, 0 duties. And that's, from our side as a distributor, that's gold, because it drives down the cost for the end user. And that's, especially from a private individual, they can never claim VAT back. So and I think that's also something from Ian's side. If you look at all the duties on solar lights, and this is for the bottom sets of the market, in rural environments, and they're trying to make money on that from a government side. So I think that's where the big issue is for solar in general in Africa. And hopefully the AU eventually gets it right, and maybe gets a standardized side of it, because we all know the HS or duty codes, it says SADC, it says all the different regions, but that doesn't really apply at these specific border posts. So I think that's something that would be greatly roll out solar and commercial solar and that. So.
And thank you very much for mentioning this policy change in Nigeria. For the people in the audience who are looking for new markets to develop their activities, honestly, this is a game changer. What's happening in Nigeria right now? We're talking about a country with 220 million people. Nobody really knows. But this fuel subsidy removal really opens up a totally new market for solar and storage solutions, with a lot of people in Nigeria with high disposable income. So there are customers capable of paying for solutions. It's not an easy country to tap into, but it's highly possible to find local partners and develop some very interesting business opportunities there. So just mentioning, keep an eye on Nigeria in the years to come. I would like to rebound on two things you mentioned, Michael. I believe 1 week ago, or maybe 10 days ago, the first trade under the free trade agreement took place between South Africa and Ghana. I don't exactly remember what this exchange was about, but I would like to ask you all a question about this Africa Free Trade Agreement. Does it already impact you in your business? Are you already closely looking at this? Do you feel something positive is going to come out of this? You mentioned several times the import duties, the VAT rules, which are all different. Is this already a reality in your businesses, or is it still at a very high political level right now? And this is a question to all of you.
I think from our side, we haven't seen any change. It's still very, I don't want to say wild, but it's still very. It's a cloud. It's a grey space, I would say, for us, because we are shipping out daily, and literally rules change overnight, and you're not aware of it. So that creates quite a lot of issues. So there's no real plan or anything assisting from that aspect. I mean, we shipped into Madagascar a few months ago, and there's still an issue on the VAT and customs, and it's a zero VAT, and I think custom and duties on solar panels and things like that. But it's still our customers having a problem with that 3 months down the line. So, that's hugely cost from a tax perspective, and that's part of SADC. And if you look at the listing under SADC, it says zero. So it's something that I haven't seen anything from our side, John.
Yeah, I think from our side, I think we've dabbled a little bit with bringing production of our Pico solar lights, or at least assembly, into Southern Africa or places like Ethiopia, but I think it's still very high level, a lot of those kinds of things, when you look at diversity of African governments. So, our work in Ethiopia is 18 months in, and we're still trying to get the right meetings with the right people in finance around importation. And I know it's a particular case as a country, but I think there's such variety and diversity in different African countries around these kinds of things that becomes still up in the cloud, and you're dealing quite, specifically with different governments, even Tanzania, in terms of where they are and importations around that. So I think we're not seeing it. We hope to see it. We hope to kind of reshore production. I think it makes sense for us to start doing that in carbon emissions and all of those kinds of things when we're shipping, nowhere close to what a lot of people are doing, but it's the right thing to do, but we're still not seeing anything like that. It's still kind of very isolated, country by country, and you fight each country to get your gains in importation on product.
Yeah, it's these duty things. The moment you make rules and you try and employ them across multiple entities and states, it's really hard to understand the game that gets created. It's put on rules, you get a game. Now you need to get players to play the game. But the interesting side effect of the zero duty implication of a solar system is that it actually drives the market towards purchasing from someone who can give you everything and put it on an invoice, which excludes a lot of players. And it might motivate buyers to buy from China rather than buy from South Africa, because the SADC duty-free zone has no benefit if there's a duty-free benefit already for solar. But you have to balance, are we pushing renewable energy, or do we want to optimize the SADC arrangement and duty arrangement? Yeah.
Thank you very much. There was another element which has been mentioned several times, and I would like to ask you, Winnie, first about this. Training and skills. The South African market is fairly developed, mature. You have a little bit of shortage of skills right now because there's so much demand. But based on what you've seen and based on the teams and the people that you've interacted with in other countries, how would you describe the level of knowledge, the level of skills in other countries in Africa? Is there a major problem, and if so, do you have a solution to fix that problem?
Can you please just repeat your question?
Come again?
Can you please repeat your question?
No, we're talking. I was asking you about skills.
Skills
outside of South Africa, skills and technical knowledge, really, because you mentioned this earlier in your intervention. Just to give a feel of how you compare the knowledge and the skills here in South Africa compared to the rest of the country, of the continent. Sorry.
I think there is a significant difference in certain instances. So as you're engaging with the teams, the various teams, particularly when the project is now in operation, you can, or during construction, you can, because our role then is monitoring, you can clearly, as you engage with the teams, you can realize that there's some difference in the way that they implement or they conduct work, and it's not even good industry practice, you know. And because they don't know, sometimes they don't know, that is a bigger problem, because they're like, well, it's just how we've been doing it. But sometimes not necessarily almost wanting to question, to say, okay, but has it been working? And that is also then closely tied to the regulatory authorities, to say the regulatory authority is not enforcing, also because of sometimes lack of capacity within the team of the regulator, or the regulator is like, as long as the project has received the license pre-construction, for instance, they're good to go. But then the issue is there are many more risks that come during the construction operation of a project, which need proactive management at the time. But if the regulator is not monitoring regularly, and then the particular people involved, the technical team, okay, then it becomes a bigger risk even at the end, because how are we going to get the project going if we've made so many smaller mistakes along the way and they haven't been monitored and they haven't been managed and they haven't been rectified? So right at we're going to complete the project, but at the end, it's going to kind of be substandard. And then you're going to want to connect it to a grid that's also somewhere there. So there's potential. There's a lot of potential in training and development. It also would potentially, I would probably recommend that perhaps engaging with a local partner as part of the training, because that way you also need a lot of buy-in, because sometimes the technical team or the people involved, they almost come and think, well, you're from South Africa or you're from wherever, you want to tell me, but you don't know how it works. So when there's a local partner, then the engagement is a bit different, because they're also realizing our partner is also benefiting, and they also like cultural nuances that are involved. So if I may not understand, but our local partner may then say, okay, this, we need to look at it or deal with it like this, in language as well. So there's quite a bit. but there is a lot of potential there, I think.
Franz Willem, I'd like to ask you the same question, because in your case, if my understanding is correct, it's even more important for you that your partners, your clients have a very, very good understanding of your products, because if they know how to install it properly, you're saving yourself a lot of headache down the road with any potential problem. How do you deal with this topic of your clients understanding your products, being trained on this, despite the distance, despite educational differences, despite knowledge and skills differences?
John, are you asking me or Michael?
Yes.
Oh, good.
It's very hard to hear each other here, yeah.
Firstly, next panel, give them a pillow. These chairs are very upright there. Yes. So I looked at some other stats, and currently it looks like in South Africa, for every 3,160 people, there's one engineer, which is unfortunate. And this is actually from a Statistic SA information as well. In Brazil, it's 1 in 270 approximately, and Malaysia is 1 in 540. So we sit in an interesting situation where we need more engineers. And I think sometimes we focus on getting more engineers of a certain profile. We need more engineers. You get more engineers, you're going to get more engineers of all profiles. Focus on getting more engineers. But then we need more off-takers of these engineers. Because one thing that's happening in South Africa is you get these educated engineers, and some of them still don't get work. So the cycle isn't supporting itself. Now, this is broadly speaking across the industry, not just in renewables. What renewables has done very well is given technical people and skilled people, another avenue of employment, and a very good active avenue in the last, in particular, 3 years, where I think if you look at technical skills, mining industry was probably the biggest driver, and it certainly stagnated in the early 2000s, where engineers in South Africa get qualified and move into mining, and it really pushed up the average salary across the space, because if you go into another industry and you're not paid enough, you're hoping to hop into mining, so everybody has to pay more. Renewables are doing a bit of that, and it's healthy for the whole of South Africa. I also want to say that I think some of these early companies and some of these early EPCs, I'm going to call out Devon here, he's been in the industry since 2015. These kind of companies have developed so many technical skills. These guys that started, and it has fed the industry. And it's really, these guys who started in solar back in the day, they bring in young guys. The other guys train them. So once you have the education there, and you've got companies doing the installations, there's a natural progression of skills. And South Africa is a skill set that's serving all of Africa. So I think it's been a very positive story from skills, because we've had a natural industry and now it's exploded. Now it's been a bit of a tough time last year. Everybody wanted the guys that have a nice LinkedIn profile. It's easy to find them, especially there's poaching from international players. You're not going to develop local guys over a long time. You need them quickly. But even that, I think, is already stabilizing. There's more players that got into the industry. More skills, so there's more people to serve the market, and it should keep on going, because Africa is a very positive prospect as well to drive future growth.
Thank you very much. We are reaching the end of this panel, but before I let you go, I would like to each one of you, and we'll start with Ian, to ask you one key takeaway that you want to share with the audience, either highlighting one opportunity that you want people here to leave the room knowing about it, or even addressing the crowds in highlighting one thing that you are particularly looking for right now, and which can become a business opportunity because you are part of it right now. Difficult question, but I really want the crowd to be able to leave with a new view on the solar opportunities in the rest of the continent.
Yeah, good question. I think for us, the opportunity, and so where we are the underserved off-grid populations. I mean, when we look at a country like Ethiopia of a population of 120 million, there's 50 million that still don't have access to power, right? So the opportunity to serve those people with affordable, clean technology and energy is for us there. I think we feel our role at the moment is to get them onto that first rung. So don't light a bush to see at night and don't light a candle to see at night. So we're getting you onto a Pico Solar. I think there's opportunity to keep those people moving up the ladder. And that's a combination of off-grids, mini-grids, and a combination of different opportunities. And I think it's there. There's challenges, many challenges, from accessibility to a viable economic model. So I think the big call is like, how do we access certain financing mechanisms? We've used carbon credits to drive our growth. Are there other ways from development finance and other financing spaces that allow us to accelerate this growth? You know, we've done 1.5 million lights in 3 years, and we need to look to see how we can continue to accelerate that. And I think there's an opportunity there with that population out there to keep them on this journey, to not burn carbon-based fuels, to cook and see, right, at night. So that for us is a big opportunity.
Thank you very much. Frans Willem,
Yeah.
where do you see the big opportunity? What do you want to share with the crowd very quickly?
There's an interesting development. If you look at electricity generation, traditionally, governments have had a monopoly on electricity generation. That's what we know in the world. And some countries in Europe have opened this up, and there's various ways of selling it. But in Africa, I think we're quite used to this monopoly. And this is changing. And in many ways, Ian, you speak to that by getting lights into houses. It's the most fundamental mini-grid that you can have. It's the quickest way that you're going to solve the basic problems of electricity. But it's also happening on various scales. So for example, in South Africa, we have a lot of large-scale IPP projects because traditionally there was a very good grid infrastructure because of all the coal. In Africa, I think we're going to see a lot more battery-based mini-grids, and these things are going to be 5 megawatts, 10 megawatts, 20 megawatts, and it might have a generator, and it might have a nice battery, and it's going to serve a local community. And I think that's going to be a real driving force, because you don't have to wait for the government to give you infrastructure. And there's much less regulations, because that monopoly is relaxing. So I think that's quite an exciting prospect and something we should keep our eyes on in the future.
Thank you very much. And same question to Michael, then to Winnie, and then we'll close the session here. Michael.
Sure. Thanks, John. For us, what's really exciting is we are developing, and through our different partnerships, is payment solutions. One of the biggest banes we have in our business is just to get paid for our goods. So, you know, like with Zimbabwe, it takes about 21 days to about a month. Nigeria struggles with Forex. Malawi struggles with Forex. So we're looking at ways of doing that, incorporating credit cards, crypto based off the USD token. It's pegged to the dollar. And obviously financing options for our customers. So to obviously get the goods released and they can continue with their projects. Obviously they've got certain milestones and it just delays everything as we go. But otherwise than that, very excited for East Africa and obviously West Africa. Further what I said with Nigeria and Ghana being a big, I think, player in that market. So that's pretty much where our focus is, allowing our customers to pay us easier, giving them the support, whether it's digital or actually on the ground, and developing on the ground resources for training aspects. So those are the key things that we're trying to develop in order to make it easier for our customers to trade with us, and obviously planning to get closer to these markets. Because obviously, as you know, from a commercial standpoint, you can't have something fail, an inverter fail on site and wait 2 weeks to ship it in. and still have to pay for it and delays with that. So that's something that we're working hard at, and hopefully in the next couple of months we're able to roll that out. Yeah, thank you.
So I'm not sales, so my advice is not going to be related to that. But I would say, based on the communities that I engage with, what I find is they lack knowledge and information. So you have been, the team here has been talking about the services that they can provide. But I think you can, if you want more buy-in, you need to influence. And that's where you can come in with almost like awareness training or creating, so that it's not necessarily just a transaction, but it's more an awareness of what this technology or this can help. Because we've been in a situation where this kind of fossil fuels and firewood and all this has been used for such a long time. It's been like tried and tested. That's all they know. So to change for them, for more buy-in means more awareness. So I would say work on creating awareness.
Well, thank you very much. It was a daunting task to address all the key topics for the rest of the continent, but I think the four of you have done an amazing job. And I invite everybody to please give a big round of applause to our panelists today. Thank you.